Production funding for Ruckus has been provided by gifts from Dave and Jamie Cummings, the Hartwig family, Barbara and Peter Gattermeyer, the Courtney S. Turner Charitable Trust, John H. Mize and Bank of America N.A. co-trustees, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
And welcome to Ruckus, our weekly food for thought fight over the news of the day and the trends of the times. I'm Mike Shannon. The Ruckettes join me shortly, and our topics this week: Kansas City gets set to select a new mayor, Kansas picks a new senator next year, and divided government demonstrates its division, plus roast and toast. But we start with our interview segment and talk about what many perceive as the coarsening of our political discourse in the media and in civil society. And joining me for that discussion is Beth Miller-Vanami, Associate Professor of Political Science at UMKC. Professor, thanks for joining us on Ruckus.
Sure.
Appreciate you coming in. The concern about political debate becoming too coarse, too harsh, is that anything new?
I would say it is. Over the last 10 to 20 years, we've seen a real sea shift from political disagreement in the sense of policy debate and values debate to really a move, I think, to what we would call the politics of destruction, where it's become much more personal. And so it's not enough that your policies are ineffectual or that your policies are wrong-headed. It becomes personal. It becomes about you as a person, and that's a very different world we live in than I think we would have seen 10, 20 years ago.
Wasn't there some pretty harsh political debate between and among the founders of this country?
Oh, absolutely. And, you know, it's just a different world that we live in. So we didn't, you know, the regular public at the time would have never seen sort of the really harsh debates that went on. But yes, there were accusations of, you know, being murderers, being, you know, too British at the time. So yeah, that's nothing super new.
And there were partisan newspapers.
Absolutely.
Like there are now.
Oh yeah, we sort of had a time period where there wasn't. But yes, the partisan papers were very full of, you know, vitriolic debate.
We kind of expect a program named Ruckus to generate
Sure.
political debate, and,
Sure.
and it does. A comment, however, on a recent show from one of our panelists caused a number of people to complain, to be offended. They
Sure.
wrote the station and called the station. And that's not surprising. That's not totally unusual. But this time, a number of the people who were concerned said, don't let that person back on the program ever again. From your perspective, is that a step too far?
Well, I think, you know, part of what we talk about is sort of this notion of freedom of speech and whether that's, you know, the legal constitutional definition or more of a cultural norm. And I think both are important. We sort of want to have freedom of speech, that is freedom from government interference, but we've really come as a society to embrace the notion that freedom of speech means more than that. It means the freedom to voice and have unpopular opinions. And I do think it's really important that those unpopular opinions are voiced, because that's how we move forward. That's how we have debates about what is reasonable, what is not, what is, you know, legitimate for political discussion, what is legitimate policy making. And so I actually do think it's important that we hear those unpopular opinions, even if they make us uncomfortable, even if we get offended. It's important to have those voices out there so that we can talk about them, so that we can decide where we are as a society.
You know, when I was a little kid growing up, people used to say, and maybe they still do, to children, sticks and stones
Sure.
may break my bones, but words will never harm me.
Yeah.
Has that changed?
I mean, excuse me, it certainly was something that I was told as a kid, but I think it's changed a little bit, and only to the extent that I think people are more cognizant today of the repercussions of their words. And, you know, there's a lot of research that words are actually quite powerful. That maxim that we heard as kids is really wrong-headed, because it is in fact true that words do matter, and words can have incredibly powerful effects psychologically.
I think if you asked a lot of people, they would say Donald Trump is responsible for all this. Is that a fair criticism?
I think he bears some responsibility, but I think the notion of incivility in politics had its sort of groundwork earlier than Donald Trump. He's just sort of, I think, heightened it, but it certainly was there before. And it's, you know, there are lots of factors that have contributed to that, but it certainly began before he became president.
Let me get in one final question before we run out of time, and I wish we had more time. What about social media? What role does it play? It must be a major role.
I think it plays an incredibly important role in sort of the incivility in politics, because when we're face to face, there's a level of discomfort that emerges when we start to disagree, especially when it becomes personal. That level of discomfort doesn't exist on social media, and so people feel much freer to disagree, and to disagree in a very personal sense. That I
one
wouldn't
more
have seen
final
in the past.
question.
Sure.
Have I been polite?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, thanks very much. Pleasure
Sure,
to meet
no
you.
problem.
Thanks for
You
coming
too.
in. You'll have to come back sometime.
Absolutely.
We'll talk more. That is Professor Beth Miller-Vanami from UMKC. Now let's meet the panel and start a ruckus. Attorney Laura McConwell is a former mayor of Mission, Kansas. Terry Riley is a former city councilman and is now head of Transformation Consultants. Mary O'Halloran is a media and communications consultant, and Crosby Kemper III is executive director of the Kansas City Library System and host of KCPT's Meet the Past and Centropolis programs. Welcome to you all. Looks like an outstanding group today. Let's find out if it is. Elections usually occur in years divisible by 2. But Kansas City, Missouri seems to have elections every year, and occasionally several times in the same year. 2019 is no exception. It's the year when Kansas City voters will pick a new mayor. There never seems to be any shortage of people eager to take on the job. Now, 3 of our panel have been elected to public offices in the past. The other panelists should have been. Crosby. They know how to campaign and what it takes. They know what it takes to win elections. So, if you were advising a candidate for Kansas City mayor, and some of you may be or will be, what is the main issue you would tell him or her to focus on in the campaign? We'll start with Terry.
2 quick issues. One is you need to come up with a plan for violence, because in every major city in America, they devise a plan for violence, and then you're able to do economic development. Number 2, we need a mayor that could fix some of the budget woes that the city is currently dealing with. The city right now is experiencing a pinch as it relates to revenue, as it relates to sales tax, collecting sales tax, and we need a person in there that will, one is roll their sleeves up, find out where the waste is, put the money where it belongs. Those are the first 2 issues that I believe that a mayor has to tackle.
Does that relate to local control of the police department?
No, I'm not getting on that issue. I just want to focus.
You said violence. I guess that would mean homicide.
But you will need the police to work with the city. One thing that we need to reinstitute in Kansas City, and I think a viable mayoral candidate can use this, is community policing. When we had a solid community policing program here in Kansas City, which was started by former Mayor Emanuel Cleaver, now congressman, you saw a drastic change in violence in the community because those police officers had a relationship with the people in the community.
We're going to talk about one issue. Crosby, would it be the airport?
The airport certainly ought to be an issue. 3 members of the airport committee are running for mayor, and I don't understand how anybody can vote for anybody on the airport committee after the disaster that's been. But I agree with Terry. We have a high tax, regressive tax system. We've been concentrated on big development projects that cost a huge amount of money. The streetcar will cost $1 billion over the next 10 years. And this is crazy in a city that's having a hard time balancing its budget and is one of the highest tax cities in the United States.
Mary, you're a consultant. If a mayoral candidate were to say to you one topic, what one topic should I focus on in the primary? What is it?
I mean, we are all excited about the immense creative development and the way the city's positively just come exploding with luxury development in downtown. It's
then
great.
Why is there a revenue shortage?
It's great, but here's
no jobs.
Here's the issue. The issue that brings up is the next mayor must develop a plan for affordable housing for ordinary people. We've got to have a city where a teacher, a fireman, an ordinary person can buy a house and live in it and have their children go to
So affordable housing, is that the topic?
Affordable housing. I mean, we are subsidizing luxury apartments.
As I like to say, to you, as the only person on the panel who's actually been a mayor, what would be your recommendation?
Well, I think these two talk, Mary and Terry, it sort of dovetails because affordable housing obviously is an issue, but there is affordable housing in Kansas City, Missouri, but in a lot of the places where that affordable housing is, people are kind of afraid to live in because you need to get under some of the crime under control. Now, I understand that Mission was a much smaller place in Kansas City, Missouri, but something we were very successful with is engaging neighborhood organizations. And so we didn't call it community policing, but we called it neighborhood organizations. And when we started getting neighbors out talking to each other, we found that crime went down. We found that complaints to the city went down. Complaints, police calls went down because people started being outside and being part of it. And then we saw property values increasing because people were happy to be in their neighborhood, and more people have been moving in. And Kansas City has got a lot of awesome neighborhoods, but I don't know that people want to move in them because they're concerned, right or wrong, about the crime issue.
I mean, racial difficulties.
But I also think the budget is huge.
Let her finish.
The budget is huge because people want to know that they're getting value for the taxes that they're paying. And yeah, they're not going to just want to subsidize a bunch of wealthy people getting wealthier. They want to know that they're going to be able to live there, their kids are going to go to good schools, and they're going to be in safe neighborhoods. And that's really what's important for a community.
Crosby, your co-founder at the Show Me Institute, Rex Singfield, is apparently getting involved in trying to get the e-tax question resolved in Kansas City. Are you supportive of that action?
The state legislature shouldn't be the one to do it. It should happen locally, and is my view. On the other hand, the earnings tax is a bad tax. It's a regressive tax, flat tax from $1. We're the only ones with that tax. It taxes the most productive thing, your labor, and it sends professionals and others across the state line.
Did you say regressive?
It's regressive.
It is regressive.
Yes. The assistant manager at McDonald's at 31st and Prospect pays a much higher percentage of his income in Kansas City
what
than does a CEO.
Of Sinkfield's income would you like to see taxed?
Well, he's not a resident of Kansas City, as far as I know.
Or any other millionaire.
Mary, you're missing the whole point. The earnings tax is a regressive tax. Aren't you against regressive taxes?
How high do you want to go on the income tax then?
We can get rid of the earnings tax as soon as you find out a remedy to fill the revenue gap. To fill the revenue gap.
Terry, 79 of the 100 largest cities do not have an earnings tax.
How do you fill the revenue gap? How do you fill it?
The way those
if we get rid of the
cities
earnings tax, if you come up with a comprehensive
property
plan, I will support that.
But
no one's been able to come up with a
gap. We need a gap in this debate so we can move on to the next topic. Not many legislators can retire undefeated, but Kansas U.S. Republican Senator Pat Roberts can and will in 2021. After 24 election successes, Roberts will hang it up at age 84 after working in Washington since the 1960s as an aide, a congressman, and finally as senator. While Roberts' retirement plans have generated interest, the real focus is on who will be the next senator from Kansas. A man or a woman, a Democrat or Republican, an independent, someone steady, someone flamboyant. Some suggest the GOP race in 2020 could bring a rematch between Jeff Collier and Chris Kobach, who faced each other last year in the GOP gubernatorial primary. As we start to think about the Senate race, what qualifications and attributes should Kansans want in their next U.S. Senator? I'll start with Laura.
Well, it's always an interesting thing because what people tend to want out of the senator, but what they want out of the candidate seems to me to be a little bit different. I think as a senator, and some of the things that Senator Roberts has been particularly successful with is the fact that he's been a statesman and he has worked with others across the aisle to try to get things done for the good of the overall state. And I can only say the things that he helped us do in Mission. He helped a lot of the local different units. So I think you need a statesman. I mean, obviously they're going to want somebody that's going to be strong on illegal immigration to help work with the president to resolve that. They are going to want budget, to get the budget under control, and
So you're looking for some senator who's responsive to the needs of various communities in the state. Is that
Well,
fair to say?
no. I mean, I think we don't want him to ignore the communities in the state, but a senator basically is elected to resolve federal issues, not local. But you need to be working with all the different layers of government to support the people that you represent.
They sometimes come together, though, don't they?
They do.
Yeah, Crosby, same question.
So somebody like Susan Wagle would be great if you look at Laura Kelly.
State senator,
State senator,
Republican,
yeah. I'll put a dark horse in and throw this out. It's been mentioned, but Ajit Pai, who's head of the FCC, who grew up in Parsons, Kansas, I think has been a great head of the FCC. I think he wants to come back to Kansas. I'd throw his name in.
How about Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, whose name has been mentioned, a former Wichita congressman?
Well, folks are not lasting all that long in the current administration's cabinet, so he might be available.
He might be the exception.
Mike has lasted the whole time. I mean,
he's got a lot of
He's
talent.
been there.
I think Mike Pompeo would be a great candidate.
What Democrats,
senator.
Mary, what Democrats are you hearing about as potential U.S. senators?
Only the most courageous ones want to come forward. What was 1932 was the last time we elected a Democrat.
1932.
Well, we've had remarkable success in the Great Blue Wave that we just saw sweep across the country. That Kansas is far more Democratic now than it was then, of course. Barry Grissom.
Former U.S. attorney.
Former U.S. attorney. He is everywhere these days. And I watched him MC the Democratic Party gala this fall before the election. Big, huge crowd, excellent job, has tremendous people skills.
Yeah, very charismatic.
I think, talking about Pat Robertson, I interviewed him many times on the radio when I was doing talk radio. He was he started out as a staffer. This is a guy who did work his way up from the bottom, but once he got to be a senator, he left the state and never came back.
Oh, please.
Seriously, he joked about it.
Please.
He joked about it. I have a recliner in Dodge City was one of his witty comments. But he didn't, I don't think if I walked down the street I could find 10 people who had actually had a personal interaction.
Terry, if Donald Trump runs for president in 2020, and we assume, at least at this point, he will he play a critical role in determining who the Republican nominee is in Kansas by his endorsement, by his support?
It probably hurt that individual. Look what it just did in the
Didn't help Chris
2018
Kobach.
election. It didn't help. It hurt Chris.
Did help Josh Hawley in
Well,
Missouri,
but I think
though.
there are other things
Yeah,
that Chris
it did.
had besides that endorsement that.
It might or might not. I think it depends
Chris,
a lot on the
he's an
circumstances. It
extremist.
didn't help Chris
There's a guy
Kobach.
named Matt Schlapp, who is the head of the American Conservative Union, I believe,
Right. And
organization.
his wife is Mercedes.
Mercedes Schlapp, who works in the White House. He's from Kansas. He apparently has some interest.
Alan
He's-
Cobb is a name that's also been mentioned,
Yes.
similar
Mr.
kind
LaTurner.
of background. There are a
all
lot
kinds
of
of
interesting people out there.
So I guess
it's
we're-
2 years away.
I guess we're not going to nominate the next
Well, I don't know. I think the
U.S.
state's going to want
senatorial
somebody
candidate.
that has some substantive background and not somebody that doesn't have a familiarity with.
Well, it's
what
going to
the
be somebody
process
who
is.
knows a lot about agriculture, and that's what he succeeded in doing, and working with Debbie Stabenow, the senator from Michigan, to make sure that food stamps were left in the agriculture
All right,
bill.
the
Good for him.
116th U.S. Congress convened a week ago in Washington amid a government shutdown stemming from debate over immigration and a border wall. For the first time in 8 years, Democrats control the U.S. House. The Senate remains under GOP dominance. This is called divided government, and some fear it will lead to stalemate. Others note that the last 2 years under unified government also led to stalemate. Some see a struggle among Democrats in the House between the more traditional forces led by Speaker Pelosi and the just elected progressive contingent, including New York's Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Analysts are asking this question: will Democrats in the House investigate the many controversies spawned by President Trump, or will they legislate? Let's put that question to Mary. Should House Democrats investigate or legislate, or can they and will they do both?
They can, and they will, and they must. It is required of the Congress of the United States to be the accountability and to ride herd on the bureaucrats, so to speak. It's required. I mean, there hasn't been any oversight, serious oversight, of the Trump bureaucracy, the Trump policies, beyond his own domination of the media every day. And that's what Democrats are going to focus on. And of course they will. I mean, there is a movement among Democrats, a strong one, to begin impeachment efforts with the president.
For what? For what? For what? Yeah.
Well, of course, nothing yet.
I don't like that.
Exactly.
There's going to be a report, of course. If
So they
Mueller's
can't move
report-
until the Mueller report is
Well,
public.
that's Pelosi's position, of course, and the perfect quote.
But the point is, the others in the party, younger, more progressive Democrats who were just elected, aren't willing to wait that long.
Oh, well, they'll wait
Impeachment
until she
papers
says-
have already been filed
She's
by a
in-
California
She's in
congressman.
fine control of the House of Representatives. You saw that demonstrated strongly in the last few days. They will legislate and they will investigate, and that is their obligation.
And I think people tend to forget when they talk about Democrats controlling the House and they're going to do this, they're going to do that. They can't do much of anything without a vote that is the same in the Senate and an okay on a document by the President of the United States.
The two most powerful groups in our government right now outside of the President are the House Democrats under Pelosi and the Senate Republicans. And if Senate Republicans begin to become more moderate and are willing to work with Democrats, then you really could see some very positive results. For example, work on health care and the lowering of drug
Crosby,
prices and so
assuming
on.
the government's still shut down during the taping of this program on Thursday morning and its appearance on Thursday evening and Sunday morning, if that is still going on, who's being hurt by it the most? The Democrats or Republicans?
I think both the president and the Democrats are being hurt by this. I mean, there's a deal out there to be had, which is the Democrats have already supported $1.7 billion for a wall, and now it's $0 for a wall. The president has talked about the Dreamers in the past, about supporting some of it. There's a deal out there to be had, and if they both keep saying no, 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 I think they're both hurt. And the one person who looks good in all of this, I hate to say this to a public TV audience, is Mitch McConnell.
Yep.
Laura,
Yes, sir.
some House members newly elected are calling for Medicaid for all, a Green New Deal, tax rates into the 70% range. Do you think traditional Democrats will endorse those kinds of ideas?
I don't think so. I mean, but I don't have a plug into the Democratic Party, so I don't know.
Well,
but
should they?
no, I don't. I don't think so.
Do you know what he's
Medicaid for all?
Medicaid for all?
Yeah, no.
No, not Medicaid for all. Medicare for all.
Medicare for all, I'm sorry, yeah.
Let
No,
me say this.
expansion of Medicaid.
We already have Medicaid for all.
Let me say this real
practically.
quick. Impeachment will not move forward until the Republicans step up and make the president accountable. And as you mentioned earlier, the Congress can't do it alone. The only way
Accountable
impeachment,
for what?
the only way that impeachment can move forward if Mueller comes back with the facts to say that Trump actually did something. Right now, what the Democratic Party is focused on is legislative priorities. They're moving forward. The impeachment thing is not coming out of the mouth of Pelosi. They're going to move forward and do some things. They're going to do things that are in the best interest of the American people.
They are moving forward, and so are we. Now we are going to head to the soapbox for Roast and Toast, where the Ruckheads have 30 seconds each to meditate, celebrate, or exaggerate. And we start with Laura.
Well, I'm going to toast our outgoing Senator, Pat Roberts. He has been a man who is he's a great statesman. He's led with his fabulous sense of humor. I think he's been very good for our state of Kansas, and we wish him well in these last 2 years of his term. And that's it.
Let's stand pat.
That's it.
Okay,
He's a good guy.
Crosby?
So this is not really a roast or a toast. It's a prediction that we might be able to toast one of the outsiders, Steve Miller or Phil Glenn, in the mayoral race, who might actually oppose the development incentives, might actually oppose the streetcar convention center hotel focus of the city over the last few years, and endorse focusing on really good public policy. I hope somebody will do that.
How strong do you think the Chastain campaign will be?
I think he might win, and then of course then we'd have to prove where he lives. But That hasn't affected voters in the past.
Okay. Terry.
I'm going to go in a totally different direction. I want to toast Dr. Beatty. She is the new MCC chancellor, and she's really been making some strides here in Kansas City, revamping things over there at MCC, because I used to just call it Penn Valley. Now it's MCC, and they're moving straight ahead, and they have a fabulous program as it relates to nursing, and she's doing some creative partnerships with UMKC and Truman Medical Center, and I look forward to them doing great things in the future.
Metropolitan Community Colleges. All right,
MCC.
Mary.
Well, I want to toast 3 Republicans that switched and became Democrats since I last had a chance to talk to all of you. Dr. Barbara Bollier, my senator, Stephanie Clayton, representative, and Senator Dinah Sykes all became Democrats. And then I'd like to toast them and their decision by quoting Thomas Jefferson, who said, "But every difference of opinion is not a difference of principle. We have called by different names, brethren of the same principle. We are all Republicans. We are all Federalists." Tom at his best.
All right, and finally, here is a toast to U.S. Senator John Kennedy, Republican from Louisiana. Asked about the impact of the government shutdown, he said, "If Congress is not careful, its 10% approval rating may be at risk." That's Ruckus for this week. We'll be back next Thursday at 7. Now for the Ruckus and the crew, Mike Shannon saying thanks for watching and good night.